We are looking at a 1996 Range Rover 4.6 liter, and I'm making this video because it is time for me to change the water pump. I noticed a coolant leak the other day, and I thought it was important to film the process because it's very straightforward. It's fairly simple. In the end, it could cost you no more than $200 to $250 to do it yourself, versus a shop might charge $750, $1,000, or possibly more. So I want to show you how easy it is to do, and to stress that it's extremely important to stay on top of your cooling system with this engine. The cooling system in this engine is so vitally important. This engine is so vulnerable to overheating. Even one overheat incident can cause irreparable damage to the head gaskets on this engine. So it's better to have, a small job like this, a $200 job like this, than $1,000, $1,500, $2,000 job for head gaskets. So we'll begin by removing this fan shroud and starting the process of getting down into the front of the engine to where the water pump is. Okay, looking at the front of the engine here, we've removed the fan shroud, and we can now begin to see the actual water pump pulley. This is it, and right behind us is the water pump. You'll see a kind of a webbed aluminum housing back here, and that's the water pump we're going to get to. In order to get to it, though, we need to remove the fan, we need to remove the serpentine belt, then we need to remove the main pulley, and then we'll have access to the water pump. Now, one of the ways you can tell your water pump is wearing by not even wearing out, by not even having to get into this, is if this fan, if you can rock this fan back and forth, that means the bearings in the water pump are gone, and it's probably already leaking, and it's way past time to replace it. What we're going to do is we're going to look for leaks, and we're going to track down the leak, and it's easier to find the leak once we remove all this stuff in front. And it's important to track the leak down because, you know what? You may not have to replace the water pump. Maybe you have a hose that's leaking. Well, we're going to remove this fan shroud. In order to do that, you need a fan removal tool. The fan removal tool, very inexpensive. It's a 36mm wrench, and this specialized tool that grabs the nuts on the actual water pump pulley. I got this set for about $17. You should consider this a necessity. If you don't have it, you're going to spend a ridiculous amount of time removing this fan. It's fan removal. So, to remove a fan, you unscrew the nut in the direction that the fan normally rotates in when the engine's running. Okay? So in this case, the fan rotates this way. That's the direction we're going to pull on the wrench with. So in order to do this, you place your fan removal tool on the nuts on the pulley. There we go. I've got a good grip there. Now I'm going to put my other tool in, and I'm going to bring the two together here. And there we go. Really simple. Undone. Simple as that. Once the nut's loose, then it's simply a matter of unscrewing it. And again, if you do not have this fan removal tool, you will be hating life, because it is next to impossible to remove this. I recommend spending the $17. Consider it an investment in your vehicle. Okay, so there's the fan. Pull it out carefully, not damaging the radiator. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to remove the serpentine belt. Okay, we've just removed the primary fan. Now we're going to tackle removing the serpentine belt. In order to do that, you take a 15mm socket, place the 15mm socket on the serpentine belt tensioner, apply downward pressure, which removes the tension, then you can simply just slip the serpentine belt off. It is now a good time to inspect your serpentine belt for wear. If you see any cracks in this, it's time to replace it. So we're going to go ahead and route the serpentine belt off of all the pulleys and get it out of here. Alright, so we've removed the serpentine belt, and this is the water pump pulley. It spins freely now, and right behind us the water pump. In order to get to the water pump and inspect for leaks, we're going to use our fan removal tool again. Grab one of the nuts on the pulley. Then with your wrench, you should be able to use the fan removal tool to hold the pulley in place. And with your wrench, simply undo the bolts. There we go, there's one. I'm going to grab that bolt I just loosened, do the next one. Okay, grab that bolt I just loosened, and do the third and last one. There we go. Now you should be able to remove them by hand. Alright, here is the actual water pump assembly. Here is the mounting area for the pulley. Here's the actual water pump housing. Here are the bolts you'll be removing to gain access. And it's important, though, at this point, to look for the leak. Who knows, maybe your leak is not actually around the water pump, but perhaps maybe your leak is this hose. So it's important to look, but I can see here that here's some staining from coolant. Remember, leaks always go downhill with gravity, so it's going to be above this point. There's nothing above here. There's no leaks coming down, so it must be around the shaft of the pulley. And so we'll inspect. Alright, so we know we have a leak. We just don't know where yet. So it's important to remove all of the things that are in the way so we can get a good look at what's going on. Make sure our leak isn't something more simple like just a hose. But in this case we can see that we have coolant, and I've cleaned the area thoroughly, and so we can see the leak. So here's a leak, and it's running up underneath the water pump. So something in here is leaking. We're going to take a closer look at the shaft and at the weep hole. So here's a picture taken from the side of the water pump, and you can see the weep hole. And you can see that the weep hole has been leaking coolant. Now that weep hole there is kind of a warning. What happens is that there are two bearings in the shaft, and fluid is getting past one of the bearings and coming out the weep hole. So we only have one bearing left in this assembly that's still performing its job. So it's time to replace this water pump before it fails completely. Alright, so we know that we have a leak out of the weep hole. And like I said, the weep hole is a good warning sign that your water pump bearings are going. And it's time to replace it. I recommend replacing it with an actual OEM water pump. This is an aftermarket water pump. Unfortunately, it only lasted about 30,000 miles, which in my mind, for the amount of work and time, is unacceptable. You can find an aftermarket pump for about $80 to $90. An OEM pump costs about twice that, unfortunately, about $170 to $180. But I think it's worth replacing it. You make that judgment call. So next we need to actually drain the coolant system before we get into this area. Alright, in order to drain the coolant, which is the next step in our process, remove the coolant cap. Make sure to do this when the engine's cold. You do not want this spewing coolant out. And then once you remove this, then we go to underneath the car and release the coolant. Alright, so we're underneath the vehicle, and in order to drain the coolant, you simply remove this plastic bolt. Be very careful. It looks like someone here has already tried to remove it with a screwdriver. It's probably best to remove this with a wrench. The screwdriver probably doesn't have enough force, and this plastic won't hold up to moving the bolt. And drain it into an appropriate receptacle, and do not simply pour out your coolant down the drain. Dispose of your coolant properly. It is extremely toxic. Alright, so we've drained the coolant, and we've also removed this clip, moved it down off of the actual area that it fits onto. Now we're going to use a 10mm socket to undo these bolts, and you will also need an 11mm socket for two of these bolts. There are two larger bolts. I also have an extension on here just so that I can get to the bolts easier. And we're going to go around, remove the bolts, and then remove the water pump.